Hey there, and welcome to today's deep dive. We're going straight to the heart of what makes connections tick, trust. We're diving deep into a really thought-provoking piece from thickshades.com, and, well, let me tell you, this is not your average self-help stuff.
Not even close. This source goes way beyond the surface, like beyond just believing what someone's saying.
Right. Like it really digs into why trust is the foundation, the bedrock of any solid relationship. And I'm talking about all kinds of relationships, the ones we have with our families, with friends even. Well, those connections we feel with something bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And it explores how understanding the dynamics of trust, can totally change your perspective on your own relationships.
One thing that really hit me was how the source described trust, not as some fragile thing, but as the essential ingredient. Without it, relationships are like, what's that saying? Houses built on sand.
Oh, I like that analogy. It's so true. They crumble at the first sign of trouble.
Exactly. But with trust, they become these unshakable fortresses.
Ready for anything. It's really amazing how that idea resonates with, our very human need to feel secure.
It makes sense, right? If you really trust someone, you're letting go of that fear of being hurt or betrayed.
That's exactly it. It's like this primal fear gets quieted, and that allows you to be your most authentic self.
Because when there's trust, judgment, and fear, they kind of fade into the background.
They lose their power over you, don't they?
And, the source made it clear that this applies to all kinds of trust. It's not just about trusting other people.
That's so important. We often forget that we need to trust ourselves, too.
It's true. It got me thinking about those times when you just have this gut feeling, good or bad. Isn't that kind of like a deeper form of trust? Trusting your own instincts.
100%. Some folks might even say it's the most crucial kind of trust.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Because if you can't trust your own judgment, how can you possibly know who or what to trust out there in the world?
That's a great point. I've never thought of it that way before.
It's foundational. And it's a good reminder that building trust in other people, it's not a one-way street.
It's a two-way street. It's about giving and receiving trust, which takes effort. Right.
It does. It's an active process.
One line from the source that really stood out to me was this: trust is an active choice, not just a passive feeling.
I love that.
It's a good reminder that we have to work at it. It doesn't just magically happen.
Exactly. Trust is something you build and nurture. Like anything worth having in life, it requires constant effort, commitment, and work.
And sometimes it even requires forgiveness.
Right?
Because we've all been let down at some point.
And we've all probably disappointed someone else at some point too, right? It's part of being human.
So true. It's how we deal with those inevitable mistakes that really matters.
Choosing to forgive and choosing to rebuild.
That's what determines how strong a relationship can be, how long it can last.
That's what makes or breaks it, for sure.
And, the source made a fascinating connection between the forgiveness we might seek in a higher power and the kind of forgiveness we try to offer each other. Like, there's this whole other dimension of trust there.
There really is. It's profound when you think about it. In so many different beliefs, God or a higher power is seen as this endless source of forgiveness, always offering second chances.
Right. And even if that feels like a big, heavy concept, it actually translates beautifully to how we treat each other.
Absolutely. It's humbling, right?
It really is. Because if a higher power, with supposedly infinite wisdom, can find a way to forgive our shortcomings, maybe, just maybe, we can learn to extend that same grace to each other.
Now, wouldn't that be something? It's a powerful thought to consider.
It really is. And you know what? That kind of leads us to what the source calls the divine blueprint for trust, and how that idea can play out in all areas of our lives.
It's a fascinating concept, the idea that these fundamental principles of trust might just be woven into, the very fabric of existence itself.
So we're back. And I gotta say, this whole divine blueprint idea for trust has really stuck with me.
It's a powerful concept, right? Like, it suggests there's this deeper design, this underlying pattern for how trust works, not just in our personal lives, but maybe in the universe itself.
Yeah, and the source points to the God-human relationship as a kind of model for this blueprint.
Makes sense when you think about it. For people of faith, that relationship is all about trusting in something unseen, something beyond human comprehension.
And even for those who aren't religious, the idea still holds, right? Sometimes the deepest trust we experience comes from having faith in something we can't see or fully grasp.
Absolutely. It's like taking that leap of faith. And, they can be scary. Letting go of control, making yourself vulnerable.
It's risky, right? Like you're
Sure.
saying, here's my heart, please don't crush it.
It takes a lot of courage. And the Source emphasizes that even in faith, even in those deep spiritual connections, doubt is still a part of the picture.
Which makes you think, it's not about never having doubts, right? It's about how we choose to act, even when those doubts pop up.
Exactly. The Source even uses the phrase trusting the process, which I thought was really insightful.
Oh, tell me more about that. What's that all about?
Well, it's like this, right? Life is going to throw curveballs. We're going to face challenges, things that make us question everything. But what if, even in those moments, we could hold on to this idea that there's something bigger unfolding?
Something beyond our immediate understanding. That takes a lot of faith, especially in a world that tells us we need to be in control to have all the answers.
It's tough, for sure. But that's where trust comes in, that willingness to surrender to something larger than ourselves, even when we're not sure what the future holds.
The Source even mentioned this idea in the context of time, trusting the timing of our lives.
Now that's an interesting one, isn't it? Instead of always wishing things would happen faster or on our schedule, what if we could embrace the idea that things unfold in their own time?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
But there's a freedom in that, right? A sense of peace that comes from letting go of that need to control every little thing.
It's like surrendering to the rhythm of life, having faith that even if we don't see the whole path, we're being guided in the right direction.
And sometimes, that means being patient.
It does, absolutely. Because maybe, just maybe, those delays and detours are actually leading us to something even greater than we could have imagined.
So we've been exploring this divine blueprint for trust, this idea that there's a bigger picture to how trust works. But how do we actually apply those principles, in the real world? How do we make it practical?
Right. How do we build those strong, resilient relationships that can handle anything life throws our way? Well, the Source actually offers some surprisingly down-to-earth advice. One thing that really resonated with me was the importance of consistency.
Okay, I can see that. So it's one thing to say, hey, I'm here for you. But it's a whole other thing to actually show up time and time again.
Exactly. And it's not just about physically being there for someone, but being emotionally present as well. Really listening, being fully engaged.
The Source even went as far as to say that true listening might be the most important act of trust there is.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because when you really listen to someone, you're setting aside your own stuff, your own need to be right or fix things.
You're making space for them to truly be heard.
Yes. And that takes trust. It's like you're saying, I trust you enough to hear your truth, even the parts that might be messy or uncomfortable.
That's powerful. So it's not just about speaking your truth, but also creating that space for someone else to do the same.
Precisely. And that kind of vulnerability, that willingness to be present with someone's full experience, their joy, their pain, that's the foundation for true intimacy.
It makes you realize that trust is about so much more than just believing someone's words. It's about actions. It's about showing up consistently. It's about really listening.
It's about being present. And, it's also about communication, clear and honest communication.
Right, because you can't expect someone to read your mind.
Exactly. And it's not just about expressing your own needs and feelings, but being open to hearing the other person's perspective too, even if it's different from yours.
So it's about finding that balance, right, between vulnerability and courage. Speaking your truth while being open to hearing another perspective. Which, let's be honest, can be really challenging, especially when conflict comes up.
Oh, absolutely. Conflict can bring up so much fear, right?
Here,
The fear of damaging the relationship, the fear of vulnerability.
But the Source makes a really interesting point about conflict. It's not always a bad thing.
Right. In fact, the Source says that healthy conflict, when handled with respect and understanding, can actually make the bond stronger.
So it's not about avoiding conflict altogether, but about approaching it in a way that builds trust instead of tearing it down.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective. Instead of seeing conflict as this big, scary thing, what if we saw it as an opportunity for growth? A chance to understand each other more deeply?
It's like choosing to see the challenges in our relationships as stepping stones, not roadblocks. So as we wrap up this deep dive on trust, I think it's clear that it's an active process, a conscious choice we make every single day.
It's a practice.
Yes. And like any practice, it takes effort, patience, and a willingness to learn and grow along the way. But when we choose to trust ourselves, trust others, and trust the process,
We open ourselves up to a whole world of possibility. Deeper connections, more fulfilling relationships. and a sense of peace that comes from knowing that even when things get tough, we're not alone.
Beautifully said. Well, that about wraps up this deep dive on trust. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little inspiring.
And remember, building trust is a journey, not a destination. So be patient with yourself and others, and never underestimate the power of human connection.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.